Welcome to First Sleep Aid, calm stories to help you unwind, learn, and fall asleep. From true crime to curious facts and thoughtful ideas, always softly spoken. Subscribe now and take a deep breath. You're in good hands. Think back to early autumn, 1982, Elk Grove Village, Illinois. It's one of those quiet suburbs, where the leaves turning feels like a big event. School buses are perfectly on time. Everything feels orderly.
Right. And on a Wednesday morning, just like any other, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman is getting ready for school. She's got a bit of a sore throat, nothing major.
So her dad does what any parent would do. Reaches for the Tylenol, that classic white bottle, red label. It's in practically every medicine cabinet in America. Trusted.
He gives her a capsule, a simple act of care.
And by 7 a.m., Mary was dead.
Just like that. No warning, no struggle, just gone. The initial reaction was complete shock, disbelief. It had to be a fluke, right? A terrible, isolated tragedy.
But then, just hours later, in Arlington Heights nearby, Adam Janus takes a Tylenol. He collapses. He dies.
And his family, they're grieving, gathering at his home. And in the midst of all that sorrow, his brother Stanley and Stanley's wife Teresa, they both get headaches.
Understandable, given the stress and grief.
Absolutely. So they take a Tylenol from the same bottle Adam had used.
Oh, no.
And they die too.
So by that evening, the suburbs around Chicago, there must have been this creeping fear. This wasn't like other crimes. No break-in, no suspect, no fingerprints in the usual way.
No, just bodies.
Yeah.
And these bottles of Tylenol, a brand with, what, over a third of the market share, a household staple.
And within 72 hours, 7 healthy people dead, all linked by taking an extra-strength Tylenol capsule. It was just this incomprehensible mass poisoning.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
And unsolved, even today.
Yeah. So in this deep dive, we really want to explore not just the facts of what happened, but how it felt, how it changed things, society, trust,
Yeah.
and why it still resonates so strongly.
Definitely. And Elk Grove Village back then, it really was the picture of that suburban ideal, wasn't it? Quiet streets, neat lawns.
That feeling of safety, maybe leaving your doors unlocked sometimes, kids playing outside without constant worry.
Exactly. That was the backdrop. And Mary Kellerman, she was right in the middle of that. A bright 7th grader, full of energy, her parents said.
So that morning, September 29th, she wakes up feeling a bit off, sore throat, stuffy nose, the usual kid stuff.
Right. And her parents, Dennis and Gina, they do the normal thing. Give her an extra strength Tylenol from that bottle on the counter.
And the speed of it is just terrifying. Minutes later, she collapses.
Dennis Kellerman's 911 call.
Yeah.
You can just hear the panic. He thinks it's a seizure. She's unconscious.
Paramedics get there fast, but it's already too late. Her body's cold, skin pale, pupils fixed.
They rush her to Alexian Brothers Medical Center, but there's nothing they can do. She's pronounced dead just before 10 a.m.
And the doctors are baffled, right? No trauma, no visible wounds. How does a healthy 12-year-old just die?
They're thinking maybe an aneurysm, an undetected heart defect, something medical, because this just doesn't happen.
But the initial tests show nothing. She was perfectly healthy moments before.
And her parents are just shattered. Janet crying silently, Dennis just repeating Mary's name over and over in this sudden void.
So the case is initially logged as, what, sudden, unexplained death?
Pretty much. Toxicology tests were ordered, but almost as a formality. Poison wasn't really on the radar yet. I mean, who poisons a little girl?
Back at their house, everything is frozen in time. Her toothbrush, her backpack, shoes by the door.
And that Tylenol bottle.
Yeah.
Still just an ordinary object on the counter. Nobody knows yet.
But Mary's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It wasn't some dramatic movie twist. It was silent, clinical, unseen.
Mary Kellerman died because she took that Tylenol. And nobody, not her parents, the doctors, the police, nobody knew that somewhere else, another bottle, just like it was already open.
Setting the stage for the next wave.
Yeah, and that wave hit fast, just hours later. And then 2 more right after that. It was so chilling as it wasn't scattered. It was one house, one family, the Janus family.
Their story is just heartbreaking.
It really is. Arlington Heights, another quiet suburb, another Wednesday morning. Adam Janus, he's 27, father of 2, postal worker, dependable guy.
He felt a bit unwell that day.
Yeah, nothing major apparently. Took the day off work. He stopped at a Jewel-Osco pharmacy, bought some extra strength Tylenol.
Goes home, takes 2 capsules.
And collapses.
Just like Mary Kellerman.
Exactly. Rushed to Northwest Community Hospital, but his heart had stopped. They couldn't revive him. Declared dead that afternoon.
And his family. Complete disbelief. Young guy, healthy, No known heart issues.
So relatives start gathering at the house. You know how it is. Shock, grief. His brother, Stanley, and Stanley's wife, Teresa, they rush over to be with Adam's wife and kids.
The house filled with that quiet sound of sorrow.
Yeah. And later that day, Stanley gets a headache. Teresa starts feeling unwell, too. Maybe stress, grief.
Who knows?
And they reach for
The Tylenol.
Yeah.
The same bottle Adam had bought. They each take one.
Oh, God.
Within minutes, both of them collapse. Stanley and Teresa. Right there in the house.
It must have felt like the house was cursed.
Absolutely horrifying. Another 911 call. The same address. 2 more ambulances screaming down the same street.
They were taken to different hospitals. Yes, but it didn't matter. Same outcome. Both died within hours of Adam.
3 people, 1 household, 1 day. Doctors, police. They must have been reeling.
Totally. 3 cardiac arrests like that. It made no sense. They thought, okay, maybe carbon monoxide, bad food.
But those theories fell apart quickly.
Right. And then someone asked the key question, what had they taken?
And the answer was Tylenol.
Exactly. And that's when a nurse remembered the Kellerman girl died suddenly that morning after taking Tylenol.
The connection was made.
Yeah. So police seal off the Janus home. This isn't just a family tragedy anymore. It's something else, something stranger. Forensic teams move in.
And that Tylenol bottle becomes crucial evidence.
Absolutely. Carefully bagged, labeled. But still, the idea of someone weaponizing medicine like this, it was almost unthinkable. It hadn't fully registered yet.
But the facts were stark. 3 dead, 1 bottle, no violence, no illness, just gone.
By nightfall, it was clear this was bigger than the Janus house. A pattern was emerging. Same product, same region, same outcome.
And people were still out there buying Tylenol, taking it, completely unaware.
The Janus family didn't even have time to mourn Adam before they became the next victims. The first full casualties of this public crime, with no face, no motive, no warning, just merciless.
We look for patterns to make sense of things, don't we? But what happens when the pattern itself is just chaos?
That's exactly what authorities were facing. You had Mary Kellerman and the Janus family, 4 deaths on September 29th, same area, same product.
And then it spreads. Mary McFarland, 31, working at Illinois Bell in Lombard, west of Chicago.
Remembered as sharp, strong, a mother, a sister. She gets a headache on her lunch break, takes 2 Tylenol from her purse in the break room.
And collapses.
Yeah, coworkers just heard a thud. She died before anyone really understood what was happening.
Then Mary Reiner. She'd just come home from the hospital, had her 4th baby, taking Tylenol for some minor pain.
Her husband, Ed, had literally just stepped out to get her prescription refilled. Comes back.
And she collapses right in front of him and the kids. Witnesses the seizure, the paramedics arriving too late. Devastating.
And Paula Prince, 35, a flight attendant for United. Elegant, composed.
She flew into O'Hare that night from Vegas.
That's right. Surveillance video shows her stopping at a Walgreens in Chicago, buying extra-strength Tylenol.
Yeah.
Then she heads home.
She was found later.
Yeah, in her apartment, collapsed in the bathroom. The open bottle nearby, 1 capsule gone, died alone.
So by the end of Thursday, September 30th, that's 7 people, all healthy, all in the Chicago area, all took Tylenol shortly before dying.
That was the pattern. But look closer. Different jobs, different ages, different neighborhoods. No common link except the Tylenol. It was a pattern without logic.
And that's when authorities knew this wasn't a single factory contamination.
Exactly. The lot numbers were different. The bottles came from different packaging locations. This wasn't a problem with Tylenol as a drug.
It was a problem with specific bottles, which led to an even more terrifying realization.
Someone had tampered with them after they left the factory.
And those capsules in '82, they were vulnerable.
Incredibly so. No seals, no foil, no bands like we see today. Just a 2-part gelatin capsule. Easy to pull apart, easy to put back together. No visible sign.
So someone exploited that, opened capsules, put cyanide inside, put them back together.
And returned them to store shelves. Carefully, quietly, turning this trusted medicine into a weapon.
And once the story broke nationally, October 1st, the panic must have been immediate.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Headlines screaming random deaths from Tylenol. News anchors telling people, throw out your Tylenol. Pharmacy shelves emptied overnight.
But the fear wasn't just in the stores. It was in your own home, your bathroom cabinet, your car, anywhere you might have a bottle.
Suddenly, trust itself felt poisoned because there was no explanation. No ransom note, no manifesto, no demands, just silence and death.
And that innocent rattle of pills in a bottle suddenly sounded ominous.
Like a warning.
In a murder case, sometimes the victim tells the story right. through the evidence left behind.
Exactly. Through tissue, through toxins. And here, with no traditional crime scene, no blood, no struggle, the autopsy table became the place where the truth started to emerge.
The violence was over by the time doctors got involved. The answers had to come from inside the victims.
And Dr. Edmund Donahue, the deputy chief medical examiner for Cook County, he was central to that search. Experienced, sharp, methodical, not easily rattled.
But the cases coming to him that week were unusual.
Very. Different symptoms initially, but the same incredibly rapid decline for Mary Kellerman for the Janus family members. Sudden collapse, no fever, no infection, no trauma. It just didn't fit standard medical patterns.
But Donahue noticed something specific,
He did. A faint smell, very faint and rare. The scent of almonds.
which is a telltale sign of...
Hydrogen cyanide. Not everyone can smell it. It's genetic.
Ugh.
But Donahue could. And for him, that was a major forensic red flag.
So he ordered immediate tests.
Right away. On tissue, blood, stomach contents.
Yeah.
And the lab worked incredibly fast. The death toll was climbing 7 people by then. Time was absolutely critical.
And cyanide, how does it work so fast?
It basically suffocates your cells from the inside. It blocks oxygen use at the mitochondrial level.
Yeah.
So you get dizzy, headache, convulsions, cardiac arrest. Death can happen in minutes.
And the tests confirmed it.
Unequivocally. Adam Janus's blood cyanide level was 0.6 milligrams per liter, way above fatal. And some of the capsules they recovered, they contained 100 to 1,000 times the lethal dose.
1,000 times. Good grief. So this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate murder.
No question. Authorities then started reaching out to hospitals, reviewing other recent unexplained deaths, testing more Tylenol bottles, and consistently finding potassium cyanide.
Which implies the killer had some knowledge, chemical or pharmaceutical.
It suggests that, yes. And the really chilling part, the randomness. These weren't targeted killings. They were random acts of violence against strangers, which are the hardest, most terrifying kind to solve.
Let's just recap that timeline again. Mary Kellerman, early morning, September 29th. Adam Janus, late morning. Stanley and Teresa Janus, early afternoon.
And then Mary McFarland, Mary Reiner, Paula Prince, within the next 36 hours, each taking Tylenol from different stores, supplied by different distributors.
Confirming the tampering happened after distribution, in the stores.
That became the working theory. Someone went into stores, took bottles off the shelf, took them somewhere, maybe even just a quiet corner of the store, maybe home-laced the capsules, resealed them, and put them back.
All without leaving a trace. No purchases necessarily made, just slipping the poison bottles back onto the shelf.
Once cyanide was confirmed, panic turned into policy very quickly. FDA, CDC alerted, Johnson & Johnson notified, stores told to pull Tylenol immediately.
But it was too late for 7 people.
Tragically, yes. And the terrifying unknown was how many other poison bottles were still out there. In homes, on shelves, how many people might open one next?
So the first race wasn't even to catch the killer, it was to understand the threat, warn people, protect them.
Exactly. Science had found the killer's fingerprint, but it was made of molecules.
Cyanide isn't a common poison, is it? It's not something you just stumble upon. Using it feels like a statement.
It absolutely does. It suggests the killer intended more than just death. They wanted something swift, anonymous, something investigators would recognize. But victims wouldn't suspect until it was far too late.
We talked about how it works suffocating cells, leading to rapid collapse and death.
Right, often irreversible within minutes. And it has this grim history, doesn't it? Cyclone B, spy suicides, cults. Fiction loves it as the perfect poison.
But the reality is different. It's dangerous to handle.
Extremely. Toxic fumes, the taste, even masked in a capsule. Handling it safely requires care and knowledge. This wasn't impulsive. The killer knew what they were doing.
And getting it in 1982, potassium cyanide wasn't something you bought at the corner store.
No, definitely not. It was used in industry, electroplating, photography, mining, research. You had to go to industrial suppliers, maybe show documentation. It wasn't easily accessible to the average person.
Which suggests the killer had access through work, or maybe the skill to acquire it without raising flags. A chemist, someone in industry, or just criminal ingenuity.
We don't know for sure, but it points to calculation. Methodical, not emotional violence.
Poison is often seen as intimate, requiring planning, unlike, say, a sudden outburst. But
Here, the intimacy was broken. Historical poisoners often knew their victims. The Tylenol poisoner had no connection to these people.
Which makes it feel almost like terrorism, violating the ordinary, killing without warning, just sending a message, you're not safe.
Exactly. And while antidotes exist, hydroxycobalamin, sodium thiosulfate, they need to be given almost immediately. The Tylenol victims never had that chance. The collapse was too fast, and nobody knew it was cyanide initially.
So by this point, the how was becoming clear. Industrial-grade cyanide in resealed Tylenol capsules. But the who and why, still a complete mystery.
And how many more bottles were out there? That was the terrifying question. All they really knew was the nature of the weapon. And that gave a chilling glimpse into the mind behind it. Careful, cold, invisible, seeking to be felt, not seen.
If the victims couldn't speak, maybe the bottles could. They became the focus, right? The only constant link between all these deaths. No fingerprints, no notes, just these bottles.
Absolutely. Especially Paula Prince's bottle found open in her apartment, capsules still inside. It felt like physical evidence waiting to be analyzed.
So investigators collected them meticulously, bagged, logged, and compared them to other bottles.
Yes, including hundreds turned in voluntarily by terrified citizens all over Chicago. It became this massive forensic effort, almost a citywide conversation through these bottles.
And visually, the poison capsules looked normal.
To the naked eye, yes. But under the microscope, you could see tiny traces of cyanide residue along the seams, and the powder inside. Lethal concentrations of potassium cyanide.
And the fact they were these easy-to-open gelatin capsules was key. The killer could open and reseal them without leaving obvious damage.
Making it impossible for consumers or even pharmacists to spot the tampering just by looking.
Then tracing the bottles back to the stores, Walgreens in Chicago, Jewel in Arlington Heights, Osco in Elk Grove Village, others, and finding they came from different lots, that changed everything.
It confirmed the problem wasn't manufacturing. It had to be tampering happening in the retail space after the bottles were stocked. The theory solidified. Someone went into multiple stores, tampered with bottles, and put them back.
The time, the planning, the movement across different suburbs, and the disturbing calmness it would require. Walking into a pharmacy, altering capsules, putting the bottle back unnoticed, probably multiple times.
And remember, surveillance in '82 was minimal. Most drugstores didn't have cameras like today. No ID checks for Tylenol, returns weren't tracked closely, no digital trail.
Except that one glimpse near Paula Prince at Walgreens. The man in the suit.
Yeah, that one grainy image from a store security camera. A tall, dark-haired man behind her. Never identified, never seen again. A frustrating dead end.
It's such a contrast. Usually a murder weapon is loud, obvious. Here it was quiet, a consumer good meant to bring comfort. The perfect disguise.
The bottle itself became the crime scene. It traveled through supply chains, handled by countless people, its history erased by the time it reached the victim.
And then Johnson & Johnson's recall, 31 million bottles. Driven by fear, not faulty design. Each bottle suddenly a potential death sentence.
One of the largest recalls in history. After that initial wave, no more poison bottles were found, thankfully. But the damage to trust was profound. The bottles had spoken, silently, chemically. Safety is an illusion. Ordinary objects can become weapons.
The first news reports, they were probably pretty confused, right? Local, brief.
Yeah, initially. Unexplained death of 12-year-old. Tylenol mentioned. Cautiously, maybe. No big defining headline right away.
But then the pieces started coming together. The Janus family, the other victims, and the headlines got sharper, louder.
Definitely. Poison in the medicine aisle. That phrase really captured it. First heard around September 30th, apparently, and it spread like wildfire nationally. Just instant unease.
Local Chicago stations like WLS, WGN, Channel 2, they were connecting the dots quickly.
Within hours, yes,
Yeah.
linking the deaths to Tylenol, though maybe not immediately calling it poison. But you could see the urgency in the anchors' faces, even with careful wording.
News footage showing police pulling bottles off shelves, shots of the Janus house. It sent a clear message.
A revolutionary one, really. That safety in trusted places, trusted products, wasn't guaranteed anymore.
The media had a tough job, though. Informing people versus causing mass panic.
A very delicate balance. This was unprecedented random public deaths linked to a household staple. Headlines ranged from cautious, investigation underway, to sensational, Tylenol killer on the loose.
And those words, while necessary, also fueled the fear.
Absolutely, because the threat wasn't out there anymore. It was potentially right here, in your home, on your shelf. The familiar pain reliever had become a potential weapon.
And the story went national fast, within 48 hours.
Yeah, major networks, national papers. Tylenol became the symbol of anxiety overnight. Radio call-in shows flooded, pharmacists giving interviews looking shaken, doctors urging caution, police setting up hotlines.
You can just picture people across the country standing in front of their medicine cabinets, staring at the Tylenol bottle, checking it, hesitating, maybe just throwing it out.
That familiar rattle of pills suddenly sounded risky.
And the fear was so potent because it was invisible, right? No face, no clear motive, like in other mass crime.
Exactly. The killer wasn't seeking attention, apparently. No voice, no manifesto, just absence. And fear spreads fast when it's faceless, especially in places that should feel safe. It made people question other trusted products, too.
But the most chilling thing wasn't just the number of deaths, it was how they happened. Untargeted people doing something completely normal, becoming victims in this private, terrifying way because of an object meant to help.
That dissonance, the harmless object causing horrific death, that's what gave the story its power. Tylenol's silent whisper of danger echoed across the entire country.
When a crisis like this hits a major company, time just shifts, doesn't it? Every hour becomes a test.
Absolutely. And October 1st, 1982, that test began for Johnson & Johnson with a phone call mentioning Tylenol and unexplained deaths.
And Tylenol in 82 wasn't just a product, it was the product. Over 35% of the pain relief market, bigger than aspirin and ibuprofen combined.
Huge. Marketed as gentle, effective, decades of trust built up by J&J, it was a pillar of the American medicine cabinet.
So initially at McNeil and Consumer Products, the J&J subsidiary, they thought it was a manufacturing problem.
That was the first assumption, yes. Maybe contamination at a plant. But then the reports came and the poison capsules were from multiple facilities, different lot numbers.
Which meant
It wasn't them, it was post-production tampering.
Yeah.
And that changed everything. It wasn't just about liability anymore. It's about millions of bottles out there, potentially deadly. More lives could be lost.
So Johnson & Johnson made that huge decision, October 5th, the nationwide recall.
Over 31 million bottles recalled. The cost was immense, over $100 million then. But the message was clear. Safety first. Responsibility over profit, even when the fault wasn't theirs.
They pulled everything off the shelves, ran ads telling people not to take Tylenol, basically undoing their own brand in public.
Imagine the turmoil inside the company. Constant emergency meetings, PR teams scrambling, internal debates about the scale of the recall versus the damage to the brand.
But CEO James Burke, he made the call.
Yes, Burke famously prioritized consumer safety. His statement about their first responsibility being to the users of their products. That really set a new standard for corporate crisis response. It redefined ethical leadership in many ways.
And they did more than just the recall, right?
Oh, yeah. Halted all advertising. Opened direct lines with law enforcement, the FBI.
Right.
Launched their own internal task force. Offered a $100,000 reward for information.
They acted as if they were responsible, even though they weren't the culprits, because their name was on the bottle.
Exactly. In a crisis of trust, names matter more than blame. And remarkably, public opinion started to shift. People saw the company's response, the transparency, the cost they absorbed.
And surveys by early '83 showed trust was actually holding.
Surprisingly, yes. Which paved the way for them to reintroduce Tylenol, but only after developing the tamper-evident packaging.
And people cautiously came back. But that whole episode changed how we think about packaging, didn't it? It became about protection, not just convenience.
Absolutely. Blister packs, seals, safety caps, those became standard because of this. The lesson was clear. What you sell is trust. You have to build it, protect it, and rebuild it constantly. J&J didn't catch the killer, but they listened, they acted, and they chose people over profit in that critical moment. That decency mattered.
You described that moment of hesitation in the store aisle. People reaching for Tylenol, then stopping. By October 2nd, 1982, it was basically toxic merchandise.
Untouchable for many, yeah. And you saw this quiet urgency in pharmacies everywhere. Osco, Walgreens, Jewel, the independent stores, managers getting calls, pull all Tylenol, capsules, tablets, everything.
Employees removing the bottles probably felt strange, maybe even scary. Gloves on, carefully putting them in boxes.
Definitely. And those empty spaces on the shelves, the handwritten signs, or sometimes just the stark gap where Tylenol used to be. It spoke volumes.
But at home, it was different. More personal, more conflicted. Staring at your own medicine cabinet?
Right. What do? Some people toss it immediately, others hesitated, checking lot numbers, calling neighbors, waiting for more news. Is my bottle safe? That uncertainty was paralyzing.
And it wasn't just Tylenol anymore, was it? It cast doubt on other things.
Exactly. Pharmacies offered substitutes, Anacin, Bayer, Advil.
Yeah.
But if those were in capsules too, people wondered, couldn't they be tampered with as well? It wasn't just a product lost, it was a sense of safety. What used to soothe now felt unsettling.
And pharmacists suddenly found themselves on the front lines.
They really did, usually in the background. But now they were fielding constant questions, trying to provide guidance, reassurance. People weren't just asking for pills, they were asking, what's safe? What should I do? Pharmacies became these unexpected centers for information, shared anxiety, and just connection.
Those empty shelves weren't just about supply, they were a symbol. The first time maybe America really confronted the idea that mass market goods could be turned into weapons by an invisible person.
It's forced a reckoning about trust in a world driven by products. That assumption of safety was just shattered.
And even after the recall, after J&J's response, that doubt lingered, didn't it? That little hesitation before taking any pill.
A second glance at the seal, that what if. The immediate fear faded, but maybe never completely left. Seeing those shelves empty, throwing out trusted medicine, it left a mark. A memory of how fragile trust is, how easily normalcy can be undone by something silent in a bottle.
The scariest crimes often are the silent ones, aren't they? The ones without a face. No gun, no bomb, just a hand, a capsule, a broken seal.
That's the Tylenol case, exactly. By early October '82, investigators were sure this wasn't manufacturing. Different lots, different distribution centers, different stores.
It had to be retail-level tampering. Someone going into stores, grabbing extra-strength Tylenol, taking it somewhere.
Maybe home, maybe just a quiet aisle. Opening the capsules, adding cyanide, closing them back up, and putting the bottles back on the shelf.
And in 1982, that was disturbingly plausible. Those two-part capsules, no seals. Safety was just assumed, not engineered into the packaging. Altering a bottle could take minutes.
And look where the bottles were found. Walgreens in Chicago, Jewel in Arlington Heights, Osco in Elk Grove Village, stores in Lombard, Winfield, all public, accessible places.
The method was terrifyingly normal. No special tools needed, no break-ins, just a person with poison and time using consumer culture against itself, acting like any other shopper.
And the haunting question remains. How many bottles were tampered with? We only know of the 5 linked to the 7 deaths. How many people bought a poison bottle but never took a capsule? How many were missed in the recall? We'll never know how many lives were spared by sheer chance.
The psychology of it, it's not a crime of passion. It's distant, cold, planned, detached from the victims who become just objects.
Mediated through an object, yeah. No connection between killer and victim, just violence hidden within consumer routine.
And the lack of witnesses, alarms, limited cameras, vague receipts, no digital trail, the killer could just blend in.
Behaving like a regular customer was the perfect camouflage. The Tylenol murders really introduced this new kind of crime violence delivered through the supply chain itself. The object becomes the carrier of death. It traumatized the nation, made everyone question what else they trusted that could potentially betray them.
So by October '82, the what's and how were clear. 7 dead, cyanide in capsules, tampered bottles on shelves. But the who remained a ghost.
Completely elusive. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no clear camera footage. The killer committed a very public crime in almost complete privacy.
FBI, FDA, DOJ, state police, local cops, a massive task force formed, but they had almost nothing to go on.
No message, no demands tied directly to the killings, no political motive surfaced, no name, just death and silence.
Investigators must have considered everything. Terrorism, a grudge against J&J, some bizarre plot, or just senseless random violence.
All possibilities were on the table, but none really fit perfectly. In the face of that faceless fear, anything seemed possible.
Until that letter arrived at Johnson & Johnson, October 6th.
Right, an anonymous type letter, demanding $1 million to stop the killings, signed James W. Lewis.
James William Lewis, born 1946, former accountant, history of fraud, con artistry, some bizarre behavior, lived in Chicago in '81 but had moved to New York.
Investigators tracked the letter to Lewis in Manhattan. He was arrested, but for extortion, not murder. Convicted in '83, got 20 years, though he always claimed innocence in the actual poisonings.
But the problem was proof, right? No physical evidence linking him to Chicago at the time of the tampering. No known access to cyanide. No connection to the stores. No eyewitnesses placing him there.
Exactly. Circumstantial at best.
Yeah.
However, he knew details about how the capsules were altered. He described the process in his letter.
Which raises the question, was that info public by then? Did he guess? Or did he know because he was involved? That ambiguity haunted the case for decades.
Many investigators strongly believed he was involved. Others thought he was just a disturbed opportunist trying to capitalize on the tragedy. Without hard facts, belief fills the gap, but it doesn't deliver justice.
Lewis served 13 years for extortion, got out, lived under that cloud of suspicion.
Until his death in 2023 at age 76. Never charged with the murders. Took whatever secrets he had with him. The Tylenol case remains officially unsolved.
A massive FBI investigation, tens of thousands of pages of files, countless hours, and still the core remains elusive.
No witnesses, no confession, no fingerprints, no clear motive. Only the bottles, the victims, and a name James Lewis that might just have been a ghost in the machine.
Killing someone with a gun or a knife is one thing, but poisoning capsules, calmly putting them back on a shelf, it suggests a different kind of mind, doesn't it? Something beyond just anger.
Absolutely. What kind of person does that? There's no bloodlust in the act itself, no confrontation, no heat of the moment, just cold calculation and a complete removal of empathy for strangers.
Criminal profiling was still evolving back then in the early 80s.
It was. And this case didn't fit neatly into existing models. There wasn't a specific victim type, no clear ritual, no obvious escalation, no symbolic staging. The only constant was the killer's anonymity.
But investigators tried to build a profile anyway, based on the actions.
They did, trying to understand the mind behind it. What traits might this person have?
Like needing control, the planning, the precision.
Exactly. Control is likely key. And attachment, seeing victims as means to an end, not people. Knowledge about capsules, cyanide, store routines, maybe even public reaction.
Isolation. Seems like a solo act.
Highly likely. And maybe a desire to manipulate the environment invisibly, to cause chaos without being seen.
What kinds of theories did profilers float? Failed chemist, bitter ex-employee.
Those came up. Or someone just compulsively manipulative, seeking chaos, maybe intellectual sadism, narcissism, or pure psychopathy, killing strangers for no reason, feeling nothing.
But it's all speculation without more evidence.
Completely. No writings, no confession, no remorse, no taunts to the media. It suggests the killer sought absence, not fame. They wanted to disappear after the act.
So the profile became less about catching someone and more about understanding the absence.
In a way, yes. Law enforcement held on to threads. Chemical knowledge, access to cyanide, mobility across the suburbs, probably male, maybe 25, 45 years old, possibly with grievance, or just a chillingly cold curiosity.
But none of it led anywhere concrete. No physical evidence to tie it to a person. And the killer just stopped.
Which is also unusual. Most crimes tell some kind of story, leave some trace. This one resisted. It revealed that maybe the most frightening person isn't the monster you recognize, but the one who never introduces themselves. No face, no motive, no trace. Just an empty bottle and silence.
Some changes happen because of celebration, progress. Others are born from grief, right? Not breakthroughs, but defenses, necessary ones.
That's definitely the case here. After the Tylenol murders, it was brutally clear. Safety couldn't just be assumed anymore. It had to be engineered.
The solution wasn't finding the killer, sadly. It was in plastic and foil. The architecture of trust had to be rebuilt because the product itself had become a threat. Packaging became a moral act.
Think about medicine bottles in 1982. Easy to open, no seals, no rings, no shrink wrap usually. You just twisted the cap. Safety was implicit. The Tylenol case showed how that very openness was the vulnerability.
So Johnson & Johnson moved fast, within 6 weeks.
Remarkably fast. They introduced the triple seal technology. That became the new gold standard. Glued outer box, plastic neckband, foil inner seal.
Each one providing visible evidence if someone had tampered with it.
Exactly. Tamper-proof packaging doesn't make the medicine inside safer chemically, but it builds in visibility, transparency. It gives you, the consumer, the ability, the right to see if it's likely safe.
And it wasn't just Tylenol. This triggered a chain reaction.
Huge. The FDA issued new guidelines for almost all over-the-counter drugs. Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act in '83, making tampering a federal crime. Entire industries, food, cosmetics, had to revisit product security.
Shrink wraps, breakable lids, blister packs, they became standard everywhere.
Not just because of the law, but because consumers demanded it. They became functional psychological protective barriers.
The psychology of the seal, it gave power back to the consumer.
In a way, yes. It restored some agency. You could check the seals yourself, participate in your own protection. It offered reassurance after feeling so helpless.
So the redesign was more than just crime prevention. It was rebuilding trust, sending a message that things had changed to protect the future. It reshaped the industry.
Absolutely. It fundamentally redefined what sealed and safe meant.
It's strange to think that before 1982, tampering with consumer products wasn't really a specific federal crime.
It is strange, isn't it? The Tylenol murders exposed this massive gap in oversight and law. Investigators faced this reality. Poisoning retail medication, even fatally, didn't fit neatly into existing federal statutes.
Murder was a crime, obviously, but the act of tampering itself, kind of a legal gray zone.
Pretty much. Federal laws focus more on manufacturing problems, adulteration, misbranding, not malicious alteration after the product is on the shelf. There wasn't clear precedent or language to prosecute these specific acts nationally.
But Congress acted incredibly fast after the Tylenol death.
Amazingly fast. The Federal Anti-Tampering Act of 1983 sailed through. It made tampering, attempting to tamper, making false threats, or interfering with investigations a federal offense.
With serious penalties. Life imprisonment if deaths resulted.
Yes, up to life. 10 years for attempts. And big fines for companies that failed to secure their products adequately. It was a rare moment where public fear and the law aligned without delay.
And that act spurred other agencies too, FDA, CPSC.
Right. It triggered broader regulatory reviews across the board at the federal and state levels. It created a legal framework where safety became everyone's concern, not just the manufacturers.
But the law came too late to solve the Tylenol case itself.
Tragically, yes. It created new tools, but couldn't create new evidence for that specific crime. In that sense, the act is almost like a memorial in statute form, a legal way of saying never again.
It shows how law often reacts to fear, writing rules for things we hadn't imagined before.
Exactly. And prevention is also about language. Naming a crime empowers the justice system. The Tylenol case taught us that the absence of language of a specific law can be deadly. The act gave tampering a name, a penalty, and a place in the law. That became part of the tragedy's legacy, alongside the lives lost.
The Tylenol murders really put American capitalism to the test, didn't they? What happens when your brand becomes a crime scene, even if you're not at fault?
It's an existential question for any company. Johnson & Johnson wasn't responsible for the poisonings, clearly, but they faced this profound test of corporate memory, going way beyond just legal liability.
We've talked about their response, the recall, halting ads, pulling capsules, cooperating fully, pioneering tamper-proof packaging, widely praised as ethical.
And CEO James Burke really set that tone, prioritizing trust over immediate profit, establishing a new benchmark for ethical crisis management.
But let's be honest, acting ethically was also about preserving the brand long-term, right? Public trust was their biggest asset.
Absolutely. It was both morally right and strategically smart. Their communication strategy hammered home that theme of trust, we are with you, a commitment to earn trust back. And remarkably, they did. Tylenol regained market share. They rebuilt credibility not just through spin, but through tangible action.
So the deeper question is, did J&J learn something permanent about ethics, or just how to survive a massive crisis? Because other companies facing crises later, the responses have been varied.
That's the key point. Corporate memory isn't automatic. It has to be cultivated, embedded in the company culture. You saw business schools start teaching ethics more seriously after Tylenol, using it as a case study.
But case studies can become formulas, maybe lose the sincerity.
That's the risk. Trust is the rarest commodity. Tylenol's taught companies that rebuilding it is incredibly costly, and it only comes back if your actions show you deserve it.
J&J's transformation involved rethinking everything. Packaging, risk, transparency, their relationship with consumers. Did that transformation last? Or did it eventually become just good marketing?
It's a fair question. What we know is that the sealed bottles we see today are a direct result of that tragedy. A moral shadow was cast. Responsible companies know they have an obligation that goes beyond profit. Can corporations learn? Yes, if we, the public, insist they remember. If we refuse to let that memory fade. Because memory should be policy. Sometimes it's protection.
Poison in nature silences, but in culture, it speaks. It rippled outwards. The Tylenol murders didn't just end with the recall. The impact spread into minds, laws, and unfortunately, into new crimes.
That's right. The unthinkable became thinkable. Once the barrier was broken, others considered imitation.
There was that wave of copycat reports right after, needles in soda cans, tampered cold medicine.
Yeah, a lot of false alarms fueled by panic. People were hyper-vigilant, understandably terrified. But then came the tragic incident in Yonkers, New York in 1986.
Diane Ellsroff died from cyanide-laced extra-strength Tylenol, just like the original killings.
Even with the new packaging, somehow it happened again. It brought back all those fears. Was it a direct copycat?
The psychology of copycats. Is it opportunism, attention-seeking?
It can be a mix. Sometimes it's about borrowing the power or the notoriety of the original act. The Tylenol killer, being uncaught, achieved this dark mythic status, an invisible force that caused national fear. That could be appealing to certain disturbed individuals.
Criminologists call it criminal contagion. One act triggering others symbolically.
Exactly. The Tylenol case became this kind of template for terror in miniature. And product tampering entered the public imagination in a big way in the mid-'80s. Novels, TV shows, even dark humor.
Check your bottle became shorthand for paranoia.
And a deeper idea took hold. The ordinary could turn against you. That capsule became a symbol of uncertainty.
So manufacturers responded by making packaging not just safer, but look safer. More visible seals, louder crinkles.
Yes, because once fear enters the culture like that, reassurance becomes a ritual. You need those visible, tactile signs of security.
The Tylenol murders didn't leave a big visual scar like a bombing site. It was more subtle.
A feeling, that hesitation, that second glance, the what if. Those are the cultural shadows. They linger quietly at the edges of our routines, in places we assume are safe. In that part of your mind, wondering what else might be hiding in plain sight.
We tell ourselves this story every day, don't we? That the world works, it's stable, tested, safe. That the things we buy won't harm us.
It's a necessary myth in a way, not a lie, but an assumption we need to function. And that myth cracked wide open in 1982. 7 ordinary people died from taking a simple painkiller.
And it struck through familiarity. Victims in their homes doing routine things, no warning. That's what caused the psychological rupture. Even the safest acts could hold unknown danger. Routine wasn't immunity.
We build our lives on layers of control dates on food, regulations, those seals on bottles. But those tools mostly catch errors, mistakes, not deliberate, malicious intent. The Tylenol killer exploited the assumption of safety. We all lost something collectively then.
There's a difference between being safe, technically, and feeling safe, culturally.
A huge difference. Products got more secure after Tylenol, yes. But that feeling of complete, unthinking safety didn't snap back quickly. The case rewrote the emotional grammar of buying things. We started checking, hesitating. We lost a kind of naive faith.
And because it happened in public spaces, pharmacies, grocery stores, the threat felt ambient. It violated the trust in the public sphere itself. The assumption that what's on the shelf is what it seems. You don't realize how much you rely on that trust until it's broken.
Over time, trust has returned, partially. Functionally, we buy things, we take medicine, but maybe not as innocently. The myth of safety got patched up, maybe, rather than fully repaired.
So the Tylenol murders showed us not just that danger can come from anywhere, but that safety itself is fragile, a moving target.
Exactly. It's this fragile agreement between design, vigilance, laws, and belief. And when any part of that fails, you get a rupture that echoes for decades. It's a constant reminder that safety isn't guaranteed. It has to be actively maintained.
The story started with certainty, didn't it? 7 victims, 1 brand, 1 poison. But the ending became about uncertainty, about a killer who seemed to vanish.
Deliberately vanished. The way the crimes were committed, they were designed to leave no trace, to make capture incredibly difficult. The investigation never officially stopped, technically. The FBI kept the file open for years, followed tips, reviewed evidence periodically.
But no charges were ever brought for the murders. No courtroom showdown, no conviction, no real answers. Just time passing and silence.
Which leaves James W. Lewis as the main figure of suspicion, but never proven guilty of the murders. The extortion letter, the knowledge of the capsules, the criminal history, living near Chicago, all circumstantial.
He denied the killings, cooperated partially on the extortion, served his time for that, and lived under that cloud until he died in 2023.
Taking whatever he knew or didn't know with him. In that pre-DNA, limited surveillance era, a crime like this could succeed completely. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no money trail for the cyanide, easily manipulated capsules. The killer understood the system's weaknesses.
So without traditional justice, what's left? Memory.
Memory and the changes born from it. The story is taught, studied. The packaging on every bottle of medicine is a quiet memorial, in a way, a legacy of prevention. It's not the same as justice for the families, of course, but it's not meaningless.
We always want closure in crime stories, but this case never offered it. It just ends with this space, this quiet lesson about mysteries we have to carry.
A shadow that endures, without a name attached to the killer.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it feels crucial to bring it back to the people. Not just the crime, the investigation, the impact, but the names.
Absolutely. The story has to end with
Mary Kellerman, Adam Janus, Stanley Janus, Teresa Janus, Mary McFarland, Mary Reiner, Paula Prince.
7 individuals. Mary Kellerman, 12 years old, just getting her braces full of spark. Adam Janus, the dependable postal worker. Stanley and Teresa Janus losing their lives in the midst of grieving Adam. Mary McFarland, known for her wit at work. Mary Reiner, home with her newborn, her 4th child. Paula Prince, the flight attendant, coming home from a trip.
Just ordinary people living normal lives, interrupted. They did nothing wrong, nothing dangerous, just took a painkiller.
That's the heart of the tragedy.
Yeah.
The randomness, the breach of trust in something so utterly ordinary.
So what do we take away from this? What do we carry forward?
Maybe it's that reminder you mentioned that safety isn't a given. It's constructed through laws, design, vigilance, and remembering events like this.
There aren't statues to the Tylenol victims, but maybe every piece of tamper-evident packaging is a kind of memorial. Proof that lessons, even horrific ones, can reshape daily life. Provide some continuity, even without closure.
A quiet legacy.
So let's hold on to those 7 names: Mary Kellerman, Adam Janus, Stanley Janus, Teresa Janus, Mary McFarland, Mary Reiner, Paula Prince. Remember them not just for how they died, but as a reminder that safety is a human act, built, broken, and needing to be built again.